Face it, the world has gone soft, mentally, physically, and politically. But here, we rise above the narratives and summit the real, because truth peaks when the currents fade. I'm Graham Mitchell. Let's get into this story. Apparently, this guy thinks it's cool to let men test drive his wife. It's saved our marriage and makes me realize what I have. Now, listen, the truth of the matter is that both men and women have been poisoned by feminism. We all grew up in this toxic soup called the feminist era, and it's led to garbage like this. I mean, you got to be realistic and understand that you got to trust what women do. Don't listen to what they say. So, this is the reason why you have a lot of women now that are complaining that they can't find a real man or dating is really hard because, guys aren't like guys anymore. But the guys are foolishly, I'll be honest, but foolishly responding to what they thought women wanted based off what they say, right? Women want to be equal to men. They want to have their cake and eat it too. How come you can date a bunch of girls and you're not judged for it, but then as soon as I do it, I'm called a whore or something like that. Well, we're not the same. And I hate to be so blunt about it, but it's true. We're not the same. And it's about time people realize that, because it's leading to stuff like this. This guy's going to have a rude awakening. You know how many stories I've heard from whether it's close friends or, even girls I've dated where they talk about either themselves or some friend of theirs who has a situation where somebody did something like this and, oh, my friend, she was dating this guy and he was okay with it at first. He thought he could handle like an open relationship. And then after a little bit of time when, feelings got involved, he didn't really think it was cool anymore that I was hooking up with some other guy. And he got all upset. Well, I hate to say that it's his fault, but it's his fault. Like, you're retarded because any real man, and I hate to use that phrase, I really hate to use that phrase because everybody knows that when a woman says, a real man would do, that's usually just something that they say to have it work out in their benefit. Like, a real man would behave this way because the guy that she likes or loves isn't always catering to that type of behavior. She wishes she could get that behavior from him. So she says that's what a real man would do. It's kind of the manipulative language that women use, understandably so, but to regain some of the power dynamic in the relationship. But see, this is where the problem comes in, because yes, if you're in a serious relationship, you're dating a girl, obviously you want to show respect and, you care about her and feelings and all that's true. However, if you cater too much to every whim that the woman is saying, you're going to wind up in a situation like this where she's openly sleeping with other guys and you're basically a cuck. And I mean, hey, if that's what you want to do, more power to you. But I promise you, you're not going to like it if you're a man. No man wants another dude fucking his girl. Let's just be honest. And I think it's time, seriously, all jokes aside, I really think it's time that we grow up and get out of this world that we're living in. Everybody's been kind of brainwashed to think like it's wrong to just say the truth. We're different. Any real man who's with a girl is going to feel a little bit possessive. In fact, here's a tip for the ladies out there. If you're dating a guy and he's not even a little bit possessive over you, he doesn't really care about you. And that's something that feminism has lied to women about. They've told women that, it's insecurity if he's somewhat protective over his girl. And then when guys are like, yeah, sure, do whatever you want to do, they're like, you don't care about me. It's crazy. So, this is what the left has turned men into. This is a real man, according to the left. And yeah, I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, this is not a real man. This is the modern day depiction of flaming masculinity. That's what I call it. Flaming masculinity. This is not real masculinity. It's flaming masculinity. So with that said, I really, especially for the young guys out there, because you guys are growing up in this world where you've been told that this is good for you to act this way, to accept these types of things. And now you're caught in a little bit of a bind where, if you go too far to the right, they label you some sort of misogynist. But if you give in to what the mainstream narrative is, you're gonna wind up acting gay. You're gonna wind up acting gay. That's what's gonna happen to you. So I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you're not gay, then you shouldn't be acting gay. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Uh, but we can move on. Let's move on to the next story. So here we're going to get into a little bit of health stuff here, because another narrative that's tough to break these days is that there's a conspiracy theorist angle. If you challenge the establishment, you're a conspiracy theorist. And oh man, this I have a lot to say about that. But I teach this. I've been studying health, fitness my entire life. Exercise. I got a degree, a bachelor's in exercise science, kinesiology. I've worked as an athletic performance specialist, nutrition master coach, all of that good stuff, right? I've also had a bunch of injuries, minor injuries from both when I was younger, being a high performance athlete, and just dealing with injuries from clients, people who come to me to fix them, quote unquote. Whether they've been to a doctor, physical therapist, or not, oftentimes what people forget is that we don't have it all figured out. And when I say we, I mean the health industry. Every generation always thinks they know everything about everything. Like, okay, back in the day, they used to, rub arsenic on people, or, dip cigarettes in arsenic to make people vomit. So if they were sick, because they thought purging was good, you want to get it out of your system. And it is good to get it out of your system, but obviously arsenic is not good for you. So we don't do that anymore. And now that we've evolved to these modern day practices, people think that those modern day practices are that's it. We've reached the end point. Science understands everything. So when the doctor says XYZ, they have the fancy degree, and that means they know what they're talking about. You should just listen to them. Now, I'm here to tell you something very controversial. You might not like it, but doctors don't know shit about health. Now, before you get bent out of shape, let me clarify. When I say they don't know shit about health, what I mean is that they don't know shit about health. Because honestly, seriously, all jokes aside, doctors aren't taught necessarily. The average doctor, I'm speaking generally here, isn't taught necessarily about how to prevent disease, or how to fortify the body naturally so it's not getting hurt or injured, or how to maximize the body's performance capabilities. Like, the doctor doesn't teach you that. For the average person out there listening to this, you go to the doctor, they check your vitals, they might run some tests to see if you have a sickness or a disease or something like that. They could do x-rays. There's a lot of advanced capabilities that do come through modern medicine, but none of those things are about, optimizing your health. And that's what the goal of everybody should be: optimizing your health. Because cleaning things up is just patchwork. And oftentimes, unfortunately, what people don't understand is that you go to the doctor, or you have a condition, and modern medicine kind of like patches it up, figures it out for you, but it creates another problem oftentimes, because every invasive procedure you do, every time you take some sort of medication, or even something like an antibiotic, every time you do something like this to your body, it has residual effects. And if it's some sort of drug, like even if it's like a good drug, if it's some sort of drug, there's really no such thing as side effects. Everything that the drug does to you is the effect of the drug. And people haven't really understood this. So then when there's all these other complications, could be very subtle down the road. You're getting sick, your immune system is weaker, or you're all of a sudden having body aches or muscle aches, joint pain. And you think it's I'm just because I'm getting older, that's it. It could be from over the counter medication that you're taking, reacting with your system. It could be the food that you're eating. It could be a whole host of things that doctors don't necessarily study. They don't study this. They're not forced to take nutrition classes in school. And even if you do take nutrition classes, I took them in school. I learned very little in nutrition in college, right? Because it's the basics. You learn fundamentals and calories and calorimetry, how they measure calories. You learn the scientific stuff, chemistry, all that. That's good. You should have a foundation in that. That helps, but you have to do continuing education and stay up on the latest research and be open to critical thinking, because science is an ever changing, ever evolving practice. And if you don't have that type of mindset, you're, no matter what, no matter how right you are now, you're going to end up being wrong, because as we learn more, you have to add that context into the stuff that you already know. And this is just something that doctors just get patently wrong. And that's why there's, I mean, seriously, think about it. We're the most unhealthy, we're one of the most unhealthy countries in the modern Western world. And yet we spend more on healthcare than anybody in the world. I mean, do the math. The doctors, the modern medicine, it's failing you, right? And even if it's not because they're doing something malicious, it's just because they're not aware of the nutritional components. Then you have to add the politics into it, where a lot of them are bought off by, whether it's big ag or big pharma or even the studies themselves. You have big companies that lobby the government or lobby scientific communities to exclude certain research that might paint their field or their business in a negative light. This has been going on a long time, ever since the cigarettes back in the tobacco industry was catching a lot of heat, and they funded both sides of the research on tobacco, both whether it was good or whether it was bad. I mean, that's not unbiased science. It's not at all. So I digress. Um, but you know, it is something that we need to think about, because like I said, too many people are brainwashed, and we're not going to get anywhere this way. The more that we continue to rely on doctors and modern medicine, drugs essentially, to solve all of our problems, we're just going to create more problems. You're going to have more people getting sick. We're going to create new conditions and then try to create more drugs and more, procedures to fix those. And you get the point. It's a domino effect. So I'm advocating for people to realize this message right here. The greatest medicine of all is to teach people how not to need it. And that's precisely what I teach people. I teach them how to, like I said, maximize their athletic performance. And when I say athletic performance, I mean just the systems of your body, right? All the different forms, whether it's your, aerobic capacity or your aerobic power, which is just essentially the ability of your body to do work for a, moderate work for a long amount of time. Your heart, how much fitness, if you will. I don't want to, get too scientific with it, but how much work, cardiovascular exercise, effort can your heart do at a sustained output for how long? That's your cardiovascular, that's your aerobic capacity. Essentially utilizing oxygen. How long can you utilize oxygen before you start burning out and going into the lactic acid phase? That's a good sign of health. That's athletic performance. Then you have things like aerobic power. How high, how difficult work can you do until, like I said, until you reach the lactic acid threshold, until your body stops being able to utilize oxygen, starts burning hydrogen, and then you have to produce lactic acid. That's your power. How hard can you push until you convert hydrogen to lactic acid? Okay. This is just the health of your body, right? And then you have anaerobic. So, then how long can you do more explosive work? It's the same thing. And the idea is that training these different systems bulletproofs your body, because this is how the body works. It works with systems. And so if you want to stay healthy, your immune system, your aerobic system, your anaerobic system, right? The endocrine system, hormones, you need to optimize all of these systems. And to be honest, where modern medicine goes wrong is that it tries to break all of these systems into individual components, and then, you know, it tries to use those individual components to fix one at a time. It's like, well, you have this thyroid condition, and that must be why you're not losing weight, because, the T3 thyroid hormone plays a role. And Okay, and then they patch that up and maybe they give you some artificial synthetic T3 or whatever, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But now this is probably going to address the immediate issue. But what you're not addressing is, why was your body not producing T3 thyroid hormone, right? That's the real problem. You think that human beings evolved for you to not produce T3 thyroid, right? Obviously, that's not true. We wouldn't have gotten this far. So the question is, why are you not doing it? And that's what you should be addressing. When you feed, same thing with testosterone. If you take, exogenous artificial testosterone, you're going to do is, the reason why people's balls shrink is because you stop, you remove or inhibit your body to produce the testosterone naturally. So basically it's kind of like if you stop using a muscle. If you stop doing curls, your bicep's going to shrink because you're not using it. So it's going to get smaller. It's the same thing. The testicles produce testosterone. So if they're not producing the testosterone anymore because you're just taking it, you're injecting it, right? They're not doing their job. They're not working. So they're going to get smaller. They're going to shrink. It's really common sense. We don't need to overthink this and do all this patchwork stuff, because all it does is kind of further distract from the underlying cause that's leading to all these issues. And that's what this message is all about. So once again, I think it's very important that we get back to working within optimization, and there's a lot of things that we can do for that. But there's other issues as well. And like I said, I mentioned a little bit about the artificial, chemicals and stuff in food. And another one that's really important that we need to pay attention to is water. And here we have a video queued up where Andrew Huberman is talking to a doctor who studies this, and I'll let her tell it to you. She's going to tell you guys what she thinks is one of the main issues with the fluoride in the water. So, without further ado.
What is the rationale for putting fluoride in drinking water, given that the contact time in the mouth is so short?
It's very controversial, and unfortunately, we've lost sight of the science. It's getting buried in politics right now, and it really upsets me.
I think this is going to be a very important aspect of public health with this new administration and Bobby Kennedy paying a lot of attention. This becomes a blue versus red, left versus right thing. We're never going to get to the heart of the matter, and that would be really sad, and the ones that would really suffer would be kids.
The children, yeah.
So a nonpartisan look at this.
It was put in as an experiment in Grand Rapids, Michigan in the mid-40s. After about a decade or so, they noticed that cavity rates were going down. And so based on this observation, it just went like wildfire. How do we really know how much someone's getting exposed to? What's their body composition? How much do they weigh? Mothers who had higher concentrations of urinary fluoride, the children tested lower on their IQ test, up to 5 to 7 points, and that's on par with lead. Okay.
On par with lead.
On par with lead, yes. What are the other outside sources of fluoride? Are they swallowing their toothpaste? Fluoride is in many pharmaceuticals because it helps increase bioavailability, especially SSRIs and Prilosec. A lot of these have fluoride in them.
Really?
Yes.
Earlier you said something, and I've never thought about this. The bones contain hydroxyapatite, 60%, I think you said. 60% of your bone minerals are made from hydroxyapatite. Fluoride infiltrates the minerals of the teeth and replaces it. So is fluoride going into our bones?
Skeletal fluorosis.
Okay, so I'm not trying to paint a scary picture here.
Now, I want to pause it right here, because if you pay attention, yes, she's talking about skeletal fluorosis, and he's talking about hydroxyapatite, which is in the bones. And okay, without getting too much in the weeds, what I want to point out to you is that, you see, this is kind of what I was explaining. You put the fluoride in the water because, it's going to solve this problem. It's going to help strengthen the teeth. And, back then when that might have been more of an issue, perhaps that helped solve that problem. And now you created a new problem. Now it's getting into all these tissues of your body, because just like I said, when you put one thing in the body, it doesn't just do this one thing. It has a holistic effect. So now it's in the bones, and now it's weakening the bones and having all these other effects. What is it is it crossing the blood-brain barrier? Is it getting into your system in other ways? Fluoride is no joke. It's a toxic chemical. So, you know, what's something you could do to strengthen the teeth and strengthen the bones, without fluoride? That's more natural. That's not a toxic, hazardous chemical. This is the type of solution we should be looking towards now. And, I could nitpick and criticize why they did this in the past, and I will at another time. But the point is that at the very least, even if we don't do that, at the very least, we should be focusing on changing it now, right? The what is it? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So we put the fluoride in the water. We thought it was good. But like I said, we were using arsenic back then too. That's neither here nor there. We put the fluoride in the water, and now we are starting to notice that there's a lot of problems associated with that. But we're just going to keep doing it because the news, the media tells you that you're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, come on, you guys got to wake up.
Sure.
But frankly, and people can probably tell, my blood pressure goes up a little bit when people say, oh, you're anti-fluoride. I'm not anti-fluoride, but I just don't get the logic. It doesn't make sense.
You're thinking critically about it.
Like, why would I continually bombard my system with fluoride at the level of the gut, at the level of my bones? I can't piece together the logic.
Looking at all the data from water fluoridation isn't reducing decay like we thought it was. It's only reducing decay by about 1/4 a cavity per person. 97% of the world does not fluoridate their water.
Where are they getting the fluoride?
The fluoride that they get is a byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. If diluted, in theory, and it's an acid, first of all, so if it's put into our water system, it is so diluted that it becomes safe. But I will say it does come in like cement bags with skull and crossbones on the front, and they do have to wear hazmat suits. It's very hard to keep it in range, and so there are some communities testing as high, we've seen as 2.2 milligrams per liter, which definitely falls into, based on the science and literature, a more concerning zone for neurocognitive issues and other health issues.
Okay, so I think that pretty much puts fluoride not in a box, let's say on the shelf for all of us to look at.
Oh, that's a nice way of putting it. But whether it's a nice thing to put on the shelf, he's trying to be an unbiased, objective observer. Excuse me. And as a neuroscientist, as somebody who values unbiased, objective reasoning, I'm sure that I understand. I understand why he would do that, and I respect that, to be honest, because too much weight is being put on these not temporary fixes, but we come to a conclusion too quickly, is essentially what I'm trying to say. So it's good to reserve your full judgment until you see the full picture. That I absolutely agree with. However, as I said, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of this habit of only trusting something that was validated on the news. Because if the news didn't validate it, or if your favorite political pundit on some TV show, or whatever, if they didn't validate it, if their sources didn't validate it, then you who doesn't really know about it and hasn't looked into it and doesn't stay on top of it, you're going to run around telling everybody else that they're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, this is ridiculous. We have access to information. We need to be better at critical thinking. And it gets way deeper. You think fluoride is the only thing? There's a lot of research on some of the most important conditions, some of the most destructive conditions that known to man, like Alzheimer's and cancer. And there's a lot of cutting edge research, frankly, that's been around for more than a few years now, but that's just starting to trickle out. That kind of shows some of the flaws in the research that we thought was true up to this point. Like I said, the problem is not, we can make an argument, we can make a case for the problem being whether we thought it was corrupt practices that led to this or whatever. That's a different discussion that I'm happy to have that discussion, but it's a different one. But the problem is not moving away from these things now. We need to move away from them now. We need to open the door. There's plenty of doctors out there that are studying these things and scientists who are studying these things. And I just feel like, unfortunately, and without getting too political, it's political, right? The people who are in independent media spaces, there's plenty of super credited individuals who will tell you and show you the research themselves. And, you know, if you're a liberal or on the left, you're usually not being exposed to as much of that because mainstream narratives are very controlled. And that's why we gotta get out of this brainwashed state where we're just, you know, it's 2025. There's no need to get all your information from the one place, the mainstream or legacy media, the one place that is literally owned and funded by the medical industry, right? Big Pharma is the biggest donor to the legacy media. So you think you're going to get challenging, cutting edge information from Big Pharma? Use your head. Come on. Anyway, I digress. Here we have Dr. Patrick Soon Xiong. I think that came out pretty good. Soon Xiong. You're being lied to about cancer. Here it is, another one. Let's take a look.
The receptors on the cancer, the killer cells, could recognize that. So even in the presence of chemotherapy, you don't use chemotherapy to kill the tumor. You use a tiny dose of chemotherapy just to stress the patient, the cancer, and the cancer says, oh my God, something's coming at me, and it starts exposing itself. So you go from hide to expose. So you use the chemotherapy at a low dose called low metronomic dose to use it as what I call an immunomodulator. Importantly...
Wait, I was asking, you're describing cancer as almost like an autonomous entity that has a goal, a will to destroy the human body.
It does.
But that's, I mean, you're describing like
it's a machine.
Wow. With intent and kind of clever behavior. It hides? Like what? You're describing like some foreign entity in the body that's trying to kill the body.
It is. It's like a virus.
But how can a tumor know to hide?
Because it has genomic sequencing in there that actually blocks the expression. So
it sounds diabolical.
It is diabolical. That's why I spent 50 years trying to understand. It's not a human brain. It's biology and how biology can mutate. And actually, your body's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's an exquisite thing. So it has to have this thing called epigenetics. So it has the genomic sequencing that says, I'm not going to express this. So we can now stress that and block the block, and it now expresses something on its surface that our T cells can recognize.
I want you to pay attention to what he said about the body is a beautiful thing. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
I was talking not that long ago about how the goal should be to utilize the body, whether it's for healing, whether it's for optimization, recovery, whatever it is, to understand. I mean, first of all, pay attention to what he's saying about the tumor cells and how they have sort of a will of their own, and they have genomic sequencing, and they utilize epigenetics, which means basically that they rely on or utilize the environment to determine which elements of the which genetic components they're expressing. That's essentially what epigenetics is. And just pay attention to that factor right there. The cancer, the tumor cells, right? They are utilizing the magnificent capability of the body within the body to exploit the body, right? But they're using the body. They're not doing something foreign. It's not some foreign thing. It's the systems of your body that can be used for all these different purposes. The way you beat that is by understanding the systems of the body. Obviously, something like this is a lot more complex, but my point is that this doctor, this guy's doing it right. He studies cancer. So he's going to have a lot of expertise on that. But essentially, he's talking about the same thing I'm talking about, which is how to utilize the body. And then, sure, with, like I said earlier, one of the things doctors do great is they have all these different tools and mechanisms and measuring capabilities where they can, maybe peer into a tumor cell and maybe they can do something to trigger it or something like that. But the old way of just, killing everything and killing all the germs, and this is not the way. This is not the way. Because when you go to kill the germs, you don't just kill the bad germs. You kill everything in the area. You wipe it out. And there's so much good bacteria, healthy bacteria in your body that you need for survival, for your health, your immune system. And destroying that is not going to make you more healthy. It's just like the arsenic. It's the best method that we knew at the time. But now it's time to wake up.
So that's the first step.
Smoke it out.
Smoke it out. But your body has mechanisms to smoke it out. It gets even more complicated. Your body has a thing where you can induce what we call DAMPs, which is damage-associated molecular patterns, but forget that. It's a way of actually smoking it out, so now your T cells can recognize it. Okay, so now you've done step one. That's just step one. That's one molecule. So this is why I think the FDA needs to understand we're fighting a war where you need battlefield awareness all simultaneously, where you have to orchestrate your Marines, your Army, your Navy, your Air Force, all in the right place, so that you can use the tumor in your body to act as the weapon, as the vaccine.
Right.
Because a tumor has molecules that is foreign to the rest of your body, and if you educate...
Did you catch that? Use the body to heal the body. Right? This is how health needs to evolve. There's no longer this outside mechanisms of everything. We got to get away from that. And while this might be about cancer, like I've been telling you, this applies to everything. This applies to the pain that you have in your back. This applies to the dry skin that you have. Whatever the issue might be, we need to get towards the source of where are your deficiencies? What are you lacking? How to naturally balance that out, right? Internally. And then let your body heal itself. Because even the term heal itself is somewhat misleading. All you really need to do is bring the body back to like a healthy, quote unquote, state, a homeostasis, where all the systems are running smoothly. And they have all the things that they need from nutrition and sleep, and the hormone systems are balanced and everything is working well. And then your body will be able to clean up. That your body's always trying to heal itself. The problem is that it can't really heal itself because of whether it's toxins, damaged organs, damaged systems, lack of hydration, which is a major one. Also malnourishment, or just undernourishment of a specific thing. You don't have enough magnesium. You're not taking in enough potassium, or maybe you could have an allergic reaction or some sort of sensitivity, some sort of reaction to a certain food that you're eating. But even in that way, I think we've gone too far with blaming the food. Let's remove the chemical aspect of the food. Let's just imagine it was the food itself. The problem isn't necessarily this natural food. The problem is that from years of having this damage or deficiency in certain areas, perhaps your digestive system is damaged or doesn't work properly. And so now when you eat this other food, there's a negative reaction. But it's not the food. Removing the food in the short term will prevent the reaction from occurring. But patching up or repairing the underlying issue of your digestive system will mean that you can eat those foods and you'd be just fine. That should be the goal. not popping pills and acid pills to settle your stomach. You're just gonna keep getting worse and keep getting worse, and whatever is wrong is gonna get worse on its own, and that's gonna lead to a more serious condition. But you know, I can only show you the truth. Right? You're the one. You know, I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it, essentially. So, with that said, let's change the mood a little bit, because frankly, that's kind of depressing. But moving right along, this is something that I find interesting, and I'm gonna change tunes a little bit, because something I find very interesting these days is that we have, you know, the political discourse in the country is pretty toxic. And one of the things I talked about earlier is not getting the information from the left or from the mainstream or legacy media sources, because they're not gonna give you the truth. They're gonna and mind you, I'm not 100% advocating for the legacy media outlets on the right either, because they're still legacy media outlets. I'm just saying that there is significant bias, because the majority of media, the majority of the educational system, Hollywood, entertainment is all liberal leaning. And so most of the messaging in all of those different faculties is going to be pretty similar. And this is how indoctrination occurs. Because if you are only getting messaging skewed or biased to one direction, then you're going to slowly drift further and further in that direction. You're not going to be hearing conflicting opinions or counter arguments that have merit from another point of view. And then when you finally hear them, you're going to be like, no, that's not true, because everybody that I listen to, who I respect, says this. But that doesn't mean they're right, because they're all getting their information from the same sources. And when you start doing different research, and when I say different, I mean deep thinking, deep research, critical thinking, studying people like Thomas Sowell, you'll see that a lot of it is a lie. I'm sorry. I'm just going to have to give it to you blunt. A lot of it is a lie. And right now I want to talk about Black history, because it pains me to see how, I mean, I'll give a lot of credit where credit is due, because in this past election, Black people seem to have woken up a little bit, and many people voted for Trump, and which means that they weren't gaslit by the racism angle and the loyalist angle that the Democrats tried to play, having Obama come out talking about, oh, you know, you're not Black if you don't support Kamala Harris. Like, man, shut up. Just shut up. Seriously. But, you know, not everybody fell for that. And I'm very proud of that. What I'm not proud of is to see that too many people are just running with that narrative. They're like, yeah, you know, the Democrats, they're falling apart, but you would never vote for a Republican. You need to realize that's a problem with you. And as soon as you open your mind and start doing more reading and opening, you know, when I say reading, I mean about like history, really dive into history and read some challenging opinions. Like I said, I referenced Thomas Sowell. There's a great book called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. You have to read it, especially if you're Black, and especially if you even have the mildest interest in history and or politics and the current situation of the Black community. Because what's going on is things are getting worse, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And I think Zuby, he says it very well. So take a listen.
The top 20 killers of Black people in America or worldwide, the police are not one of them. So if you had a movement called Black Lives Matter and you genuinely meant what it said on the tin, let's talk about heart disease. Let's talk about strokes. Let's talk about accidents. Let's talk about suicides. Let's talk about homicides primarily, which are committed by other Black people on Black people. Let's talk about all the things. Let's take the top 10 things that kill Black people and let's make a movement. And also, if your issue is police brutality and police killings, the police in the USA every single year kill more white people than they do Black people. Most people can't even name one.
So, did you see that? This is something that has been pushed on the black community for decades, that it's the police brutality that's killing all these black people, and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And most of y'all don't even know that Black Lives Matter, the organization, was a straight up scam. They were just stealing money essentially from people and funneling it to like one small, I don't remember her name, the girl who was at the head of the organization. She was just pocketing the money. It's just a grift. Not to mention the potential nefarious aspect behind it with the trans movement, which she was directly involved in as well. Candace Owens did some great reporting on it. And people need to stop being so afraid of listening to these voices that the news tells you is a horrible person. Here's a good tip for you. When there's a person who is well known, right? It's not like they're just like a nobody or something. You have a prominent figure like a Candace Owens or somebody like that, which you should never agree 100% with anything that anybody says. That's, if you're really doing critical thinking, you're never going to agree 100% with 100% of something that one person says. You're always going to agree with a lot of stuff, but you should have your own thoughts and be able to disagree somewhat on some issues. However, Candace Owens does great reporting. It doesn't mean she's right all the time. She does great reporting, and she's right a lot of times. And she has gone deep. She went deep into the Black Lives Matter issue. And guess what? A lot of people were hating on her, but a lot of people were cheering her on. And now all of a sudden she's a pariah or whatever. And you got to start seeing what's going on here, right? We're being played. And it really infuriates me, because I personally, my biggest pet peeve, I don't like being lied to. I don't like my intelligence being insulted. I hate it. I'd rather, give it to me straight. Give it to me raw. Tell me what it is. I'd rather you say something that I really don't like than play this game where we're gonna, pretend that we care and you really don't care, because we're wasting each other's time here. Let's get to the bottom of the issues. Let's not be afraid to do deep thinking, even if it offends you, right? We need to grow up, okay? Grow up, challenge your previously held beliefs, read more books, open your mind, and I think that will go a long way towards helping all of us evolve. And that's what we need right now. We need to evolve. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.